are probably people, especially out there in the corporate world, who would have you believe that it's equal opportunity for everybody. What's the problem? It's just that maybe women aren't as smart, transgender, they just can't get along with everybody, whatever it is that the issue is, right? So what we're going to do is kind of explore this. We've got a great panel today. I'll have Jadra, is that how you pronounce your name, Jadra?
This is Radhika.
Radhika. Oh, Radhika. Okay. Thank you, Radhika. I'm glad you were able to join us. So first of all, though, we need to understand, we have a great panel with us today. We're going to go through a little bit about what does it mean? What are the myths of gender equality in STEM? And let's explore that a little bit so that we can have a really good discussion about this at the other end. So really what we want to do is really make the business case for it. There's a lot of emotional reasons and social justice reasons that we want to do this, but what I'm really arguing, this is an economic justice issue, and it's an economic growth issue for all of us in the entire world. We have scarce resources. We're not focused on those resources that really can help benefit us, and that's really where we're going to go with this. So there's a lot of good emotional reasons to do this, but let's move ahead. So, okay, next slide. So let's just talk about what gender equality actually means. It's where people have the rights, the responsibilities, and the opportunities, regardless of their gender. Right now, we find a lot of people who are non-white and non-male often do not have the opportunities. They have a lot of responsibilities, but they feel that they're down on their rights and their opportunities. So that's what we really need to focus on. Next slide. So why does that matter? Well, you know, women make, on average, 80% of what a white man makes for doing the same work. And if you're a Latinx, it's 61 cents on the dollar. Black women, 71 cents on the dollar. Asian American women have it a little bit better, and I'm not sure why, but 95 cents to the dollar. Now, this would be great if women could walk around with a discount card that says, okay, every time I go into a store, every time I pay my rent, every time I pay my medical bills, I get 20% off. But it doesn't work that way, does it? So this is a real problem for women in particular. Next slide. So this is a really disturbing slide right here that I pulled up yesterday. U.S. poverty rates for adult women. I mean, you're almost there, many of you. 36% more likely to live in poverty than men. And if you take a look at the data here, the poverty rates for adult women are off the hook, especially if you're a woman with disability. If you have a family, if your family is headed by an unmarried mother, it's devastating. So you just don't have the opportunities to move ahead that others do, and it hits your pocketbook. Next slide. The reality is, if women were paid equally, it would benefit all of us. The money would be circulating through the economy. Our GDP, gross product, gross product, would rise by 512 billion. And of course, remember, all of this is pre-COVID, so we don't know how that's going to impact all of this, except that we know that women have been impacted much worse through COVID than other folks have, because they typically have jobs that are hit hardest in the service sector. So 60% of women would earn more, poverty rate for working women would be cut, and almost 30 million children would probably be lifted out of poverty. Next slide. And the poverty rate for just single women would drop, even for that, significantly. And 2/3 of working single mothers would earn more, cutting their poverty rate in half. So these are real numbers. And when people don't have the ability to pay their rent and pay everything, then the entire economy plummets. I mean, and that's what we're faced with today. Next one. And marriage and motherhood are found to be major factors in the gender pay gap. It is expected when a woman has a baby that if there's somebody that's going to stay home, in my generation, it was going to be the woman, right? But when you're out of the market for 10 years, as I was, raising my children, it is very difficult to get back in the market and resume where you were. You're going to be behind. You're going to be behind pay-wise. You're going to be behind in terms of being able to be promoted, because you're not going to be seen as a team player. You left. So click again. So the gender pay gap, you click again, an entire community's economic health. So if she can't earn more, she can't pay her bills, the entire economy is impacted by that. And then it's not just female-male, right? So gay men earn less than straight white men, lesbians earn more than heterosexual women, but lesbians earn less than all men on average. Female transgender workers earn less after they transition. Male transgender workers earn more. So it really is a gender issue. It's a gender equality issue. There's a pattern here. Next. And it always hasn't been that way. The first computers were women. And this is a perfect example of, I think, why women have been discouraged to go into the computer science fields. The very first project was built by 6 women. It was a first all-electronic digital computer, and they had no programming tools. All they had was desktop calculators. 6 women figured out, programmed the world's first missile ballistics trajectory. I mean, complicated calculation, right? When they completed the project, it was successful, but when they announced it on February 14th, 1946, look who took the stage. It wasn't the women who had actually done the work, it was the men who took credit for it. So the first computers were women, but now let's look at what happened in the years since. Next slide. As you can see, there's been a lot of progress in STEM fields, physical science, medical school, law school, but look what's happened to computer science. Ever since around the mid-1980s, the number of women entering computer science, the world has dropped dramatically. There's a lot of different reasons for this. We're not going to go into that today, but you can see, Houston, we have a problem just in terms of women being interested in this field. Next. Could also be that we're not paid the same as others, right? So take a look at this income disparity for women between women and men. Data architect, over $13,000 on average, less than a male counterpart, and it goes from there. There are some areas where women are making more. Network engineer and technical writer. Again, we could talk forever about why this is, but there we go. There is a gender gap, wage gap. Next. And then, of course, we have the global talent shortage. Again, not sure how COVID impacts all of this, but if you look at it globally, we're going to be, by 2030, 4.3 million workers short in the tech field, and 162 billion of unrealized revenues just in the United States. So this is a shared economic growth challenge too. It is not just a woman problem. Next. And just plain old diversity increases the likelihood of innovation. That's just it. It's the bottom line. And you can see here, companies with below average diversity scores, 26% innovation revenue. If you've got diversity, you're off the hook, 45%. It goes off from there. So again, there's a business reason for looking at diversity in a positive way. Next. All right. And technology is changing our world. We're figuring out that right now by 2026, 3.5 million computing related job openings, and yet only 17% of these jobs could be filled by US computing bachelor's degree recipients. Okay, so we have a mismatch. Diversity in computing is lacking. You can see the numbers here. So change in leadership is critical. We have people that can do the job, talented, wonderful people, as you all know, but we're not encouraging them to do that. What's going on here? Next. So let's fix this. Today, I'm really pleased to be able to present to you our panel today. Let's see now. I first want to introduce Radhika Jadchirla. Am I pronouncing your name right, Radhika?
Yes, you did. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
So Radhika does come here. She went to San Jose State and graduated there with her MBA, and then she went to Duke University where she focused on data visualization. So think VR, AR, IoT applications, which is really wonderful in our world, isn't it? Right now, she serves as the lead partnership for Verizon 5G Labs in Silicon Valley, which I look forward to learning more about in the future, where she scopes startups that align with partnership opportunities that lead to project and revenue brand generation. So in other words, she believes in partnerships, which is awesome because as a city municipal person, public-private partnerships is how we get everything done. So welcome to the conversation, Radhika. I really we're going to enjoy having you.
Thank you.
So we have a number of success managers. Maybe each of you could, actually before I do that, sorry, Radhika, would you like to say a few words about why you're here today? Sorry, this will let you a chance to speak.
No, that's okay. It's great. I love the topic, and I have been part of some of these discussions in the past, I think 4 or 5 weeks. More than the gender equality, it's more that I'm noticing how people are looking at an individual, not from just the gender point of view, but also from their role, their existence, and the past history. So it's been a very interesting topic. And when Derek asked me, he said, this will be for coming interns. I come from a background of education. I have run a few startups and incubators and initiated some incubators in education. And I strongly believe in education equally, probably because of the way I was brought up. So it sounded very exciting to be part of this panel and see what the young minds bring to the table.
It is really exciting, believe me. The generational difference between us and them is like astonishing, and I'm just
absolutely
love this. So it's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. I'm really glad you are. So we'll just quickly go down. Could you each of the success managers that are online here, starting with Akel and then Alexis, just in order here, tell me who you are, what school you came from, and why you were interested in being on this panel today, because all of you self-selected.
Hi, I'm Akil. I go to UC Merced, and I'm a success manager at PilotCity. I also work on the product team on certain projects. And I was invited to be a part of this panel, and I think there's some points that I can actually share maybe on my side of things, because obviously I'm not a woman, but I do have things I could add, I feel.
We need you.
And yeah, I feel like this could also be a great experience for me to learn like on the other perspective of things. So yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And Alexis?
Hi, I'm Alexis. I came from Alameda High. I just graduated like yesterday. And thank you. And yeah, I'm a success manager and I'm also an intern, so that's pretty cool. And obviously as a woman, I'm affected by all of this, so that's why I wanted to attend the panel today.
Fantastic, thank you. And Casey, are you here?
Yeah.
You are, okay.
I'm Casey. I attend Tamalpais High School, and I'm also success manager at PilotCity. And like Akil, I thought I could have 1 or 2 interesting things to contribute. Obviously, I'm not a woman, and I probably don't experience much of this firsthand, but I primarily wanted to just attend to learn more about your guys' experiences.
Fantastic. You're welcome to the conversation. We need our men in this conversation, so thank you. Ria, I don't think I see you here, so we'll skip over you. And then, of course, Tatiana. Good to see you again, sweetie. What's up? Where are you?
I'm right here.
Okay.
I'm Tati. I'm an incoming junior at Antioch High School, and I was interested in this because I was on the women's panel last year at the Zero Net Energy Center from last summer, from the internship, and I just kind of want to, talk about it this year as well because it's an interesting topic that doesn't really get talked about that much.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll be talking about it in a very positive and empowering ways over the next few weeks. So if you could advance to the next slide, Monica. We're going to rest on this one. So there's a lot of different ways we could carry this discussion, right? But I think even carrying forward from the last discussion about stress and mental health, it's the importance of advocacy as you're going through this. And do women and men have equal shots at getting the kind of sponsorships and mentorships and someone who just goes to bat for you? And how important is that in going through your career? So we're just going to dig a little bit deeper into our panelists' experiences, and we're going to start with the first question. So what are some of the personal experiences or just compelling arguments that influence how you think about gender and tech? So that's just a really broad question to get this thing going. And maybe Radhika, we could start with you.
I was hoping you wouldn't pick me on this one.
I'm going to pick you right out the gate here.
Well, let me put it in this way. There are two schools of thoughts I have come across in my career. Just to give you an insight, just like Deborah, I started working part-time to take care of my kids, and jumping back was, I would say it was a bigger leap than what I had expected. But I will tell you that my past network has always been a nice support for me to push it forward, like a nice launching pad for me, not in the job, but at least in the connectivity part of it. And I have somehow I have more male contacts than female contacts, and I don't know why. It's just happened to me most of the time.
It happens to us all, doesn't it really happen? Because that's the world we're in. It's mostly men in there,
exactly, right? Exactly. But I would say the two schools of thoughts that I have come across is, one is, I don't know whether it moves to the gender point of it, but what can you do? What have you brought to the table? And what you're talking, can you do it in action? Like, do your actions speak your words? Is the first school of thought I've seen. And at that point of time, there's a big filter, or there's a big glass in front of us, or a wall, which does not look into the gender part of it. The other part of it that I have seen, the second school of thought, is, great, you brought this to the table, but let's dig deeper, and voila, it becomes someone else's idea than what you have done. And when you ask or question about it, it's like, well, your resources have been exhausted. So there are two different schools of thought, and I don't say they both are independent. They kind of reside one on top of the other. And I've had experiences with both type of schools, to be honest with you, and that shapes the way how I work with people. In my current role, at least I would say that it is seen from the first point of view as, what can you bring to the table and can you execute it? I don't care what your gender is. And that has been, in a way, I would say it has been more of hard work and KPI driven. So you got to prove yourself to be equally available, but at the same time, you got to prove yourself to say that you're ahead of the curve, which is what I like and I prefer, because that puts a complete wall in front of what your gender is, what your past was, what color you are, or any of those things. And it gives me the enthusiasm to push myself beyond boundaries. And I would say that you come across both schools all the time. It's just that how you present yourself as a confident, achievable person. I think if you can do that, quite a bit of the gender gap does get covered up.
So you said something interesting that I caught. You said, if you're equally available. So we know that with women, it's really tough, right? Because we're responsible not only for our own children, but
Yes.
often for the mental health of the entire family, including our parents and our sisters
Yes.
and our brothers, and somebody's dead. And, we have to take care of all of somebody's sick. We're the ones that have to give things up. So talk about that. What impact has that been? And then we'll move on to some of the youngsters.
Sure. So for me, it has been, as I said, I had to take part-time jobs, and that's like puts you down a little bit. And the flexibility factor was there, but then definitely hits your pay scale and other perks that you probably would be getting, which otherwise was not a hit. But I would say that that's because one of the choices I made to be available to my family. My husband was very supportive in saying that you go ahead and I'll stay back. But I don't know, I think it's a motherly instinct that made me stay back more. I would blame that on me for more reason. Being a woman, you like to be, I don't know, more around, to be aware and share than share and hear.
Yeah.
So that's something I would put as my thing. But I have friends who have pushed themselves forward and been very successful in their careers. I define success as your personal satisfaction and not as a title. You could be having a CEO title and could be completely miserable in your personal life.
Yep.
And personal life doesn't mean family life. Personal life means you as an individual.
Right.
And you could be at a medium role or a decently visible role, but not a top role, but at the same time, you have a fulfilling life. So success depends on how you define for yourself. I prefer the latter one than the former one. But in the latter one, I do aim to see how far I can push myself to go forward.
Okay, so it really depends a lot on what you put into it, and maybe today it's different than it was for me 30 years ago, where you could push and push and push. And I remember being told very distinctly, why are you always asking questions? Why can't you just leave it alone? Why can't you just let things be the way they are?
Yeah.
Right, so hopefully things have changed. So Alexis, and then I'm going to ask Akil, how would you ask, so what is it in your world, and you're a high schooler, that really influences how you think about gender and technology? Alexis.
I think our literature really highly influences it, because as said in the last panel, as Kristen was talking about, or not the last panel, 2 panels ago, about you know, our teacher, Miss Rona, she's an English teacher, and she's really, really insightful. And something that she was talking to us about was radical empathy, which is essentially the fact that, you know, someone can be going through something and you don't necessarily have to relate to them in order to fully understand it. Like, you just have to, like, trust their experiences. And we read this book called We Should All Be Feminists by, I'm gonna butcher her name, but it's like Ngozi Chinua Achebe or something like that. She did a TED talk on it, and basically the book, like, for me as a woman, obviously it highlighted everything that I've experienced and a lot of other women would experience or have and will, hopefully not will, but you know what I mean, experience. And then I just thought it was interesting how, like, guys literally had no idea about it, or like they were taught in a way that, you know, made them think like, oh yeah, you know, like women are less or something like that, and they've been just fed into that narrative, which I feel like not bad about, but like, you know what I mean, like it's not coming from a place of like education, it's solely from ignorance. And I think that's like majority of the reason why, like, aside from like our society just being systemic and like suppressing us, like that's a lot of the reason why our society is how it is today.
So before we go to Akil, interesting fact. Did you know that when computers first came out in 1985, Lordy, I actually remember those days. When they first came out in 1985, they were marketed to boys and men. There was no marketing towards women whatsoever. So there's probably a really good reason. And of course, in the movies, you know, nerdy boy saves the world and gets the girl. So things like that, where it's really developed in us from an early stage that maybe computers and tech wasn't really for women. Maybe it's not our thing. So it's just some interesting tidbits from the past. So Akil, so when you think about gender and technology, well, what does that mean to you?
Well, when so like in high school, right, I'm doing a CS major right now, and I've been working with like STEM related projects since like high school. And I guess back then I just never really thought of the whole gender thing and the underrepresentation of women in it too much. Like I never thought about that like in high school. Now when I look back on things, I realize like, oh yeah, in my robotics club, for example, it was majority guys and there'd be like very few girls in there. And even though we had like a female teacher who headed the club and she'd always promote it, it just never, for some reason there were always lesser girls in the club or in the class. And I've never really known exactly why that's the reason, because I feel like there's not like any, at least from what I've seen, I haven't really noticed like discrimination per se, like maybe like a girl being given less work or something. I've never personally seen that happen. And like I've always wondered why there's lesser girls in the clubs or lesser girls interested in like STEM related things or in technology. And I've never exactly been sure why that's an issue. And I feel like, but the girls who have been in our clubs, I feel like they've always been equally treated. They've always been like very active members in the clubs. And that's basically like what I've mostly seen in my experiences in like school and technology. But yeah.
So have you ever talked amongst your friends or to women and asked them, like, why is it there's just so few of you in this class or in this club? Have you asked them?
I haven't exactly asked that question, but I feel like sometimes I have I have female friends, right? And sometimes the only time we talk about these issues, unfortunately, is when like if something shows up on the news. And it's like it's become that only when something happens is that do people actually talk about it. Like if on the news like it comes out that some actress got underpaid compared to a male actor in the same TV show or something, that's like the only time that we would speak on these issues. But other than that, I haven't personally spoken too much on it.
So you're still kind of puzzled about what the problem is. Is that fair to
Like,
say? It's not a criticism. It's
yeah. I'm aware that there's like lesser women in it, but I don't have an answer as to why. Like, I'm not sure why that's the reason or why that's happening.
All right. So Toddy, so can you talk about, have you advocated for change at all? So have you had experiences, and I'd love it if you guys could get a little bit specific about experiences that you've had. Have you had an experience where you really have felt that you've had to advocate for change, or you decided you wanted to advocate for change? And was it a success? What were the challenges of that?
At my school, I'm in the engineering academy, and it's male dominated. And I've had some teachers that wouldn't treat us as female and male, like the treat us as if there were a difference. They just treated us as engineers and would tell us, you're an engineer, there's no difference. And there are some teachers that do see gender. I had a teacher last year that would talk to all the females in my class as if we were children, like that if we didn't understand what he was saying, even though the females actually in my academy are actually above most of the males in what we're doing. And we went and we talked about it, and he did stop treating us like that, but it was still kind of our first experiences having to deal with kind of being on a different level. And it was very it kind of got us a bit angry because we understand the same, and we shouldn't be talked to like we don't understand, or that we're less than males or don't understand as much.
Fantastic. And I also want to encourage all the panelists, two things. Those of you who are viewing, please enter questions into the chat. We're going to leave time for that toward the end. And we just want to hear your comments, because we're going to save this, and this is all part of our data gathering, right? About how we can improve our program, how we can improve how we work with everybody, and to really identify some of these challenges that are unnecessary, right? It's unnecessary to impose a gender challenge into the top of this. So Casey, would love to hear from you now. Have you ever had the chance, Casey, to talk to friends or adults about these issues, just even as a curiosity? And do you have a personal example that you could share with us?
Unfortunately, like Akil said, the only time I ever really end up talking about issues like these is when something in the news comes up, like either a bill of sorts that is passed that discriminates against women, or something of that sort. But I would say that in terms of like activism, not me personally, but I would say the organization PilotCity does a very good job of promoting women in STEM. And I'd say a lot of these younger companies that are starting up in the present have done a very good job promoting that. I'd say a lot of times it's the older companies that have been around since like 1995, when computers were being marketed to just boys and men, that are hesitant to include women in their programs.
So the older the company and maybe the more established, the less likely they want to stir things up.
Yeah, accept the change.
Okay. And do you, from that point of view, do you, even in high school, do you see it? So for example, you went to school in, say it again, was Marin County?
Yeah, Marin County.
Marin County. So I mean, that's typically a pretty white place.
Yeah, very white.
And so, and probably pretty conservative. Did you see in your education anywhere, did you see any kind of difference between how men and women in high school were treated by the teachers and the adults in terms of shepherding, advocating for kids to go into certain directions?
I would say actually in my school district, it's a very liberal area. The teacher of my computer programming class that I've had for 3 years is a woman who graduated from Dartmouth, and she's very prestigious in the computer programming field. But unfortunately, there's only like 5 or 6 women in the class every year. But I would say they like Tati said, they're like they're kind of better at it than I am. They have the patience to learn it, and they have the open mind, but there's not many women that have the open mind to learn that.
So perhaps
actually, no, that's not. Yeah, I would say it's more of like at a young age, a discouragement.
The discouragement. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so much fun. There's things I could show you about how women are discouraged and how we are our own worst enemies sometimes in terms of self-image, right? And we keep ourselves out. So that really points to then the really importance of advocacy, right? So I'd love to, and then I would like to open the conversation up to any of you. Let's have a conversation rather than me picking on people. What are some of the ways you've benefited from support by adult advocates, whether it's your parents, whether it was a counselor at school, whether it was a teacher, to encourage you on your road to technology, to having a career in technology? And I'd love, boys and girls, I both want you to please address that question. So whoever wants to start. Was there an important adult in your life that moved you in that direction?
I think I'll go on this one because I think this is something that I advocate myself. So I come from a very strong military background. My dad was in the army protecting the country all the time at the front, and we would barely see him with us. Maybe 2 days in a month is what you would see him if you were lucky. But the 2 days he was there, it was like a year with us, and in a positive way, because he made sure that my brother and I were not just treated equal, but trained equal in everything. Whether you say sports, whether you say discipline, whether you say art, whether you say anything that you say, even education, we both were equally held, or we both were held equal for any of the factors that he would say, including education. And I would say at that time, it was not very obvious to me what he was doing, but as I grew up, I understood that he trained both of us to be independent in our life. And for me, it was more because he knows that when I move out of the house, I won't be under his shadow, or I won't be having him watching my back all the time. So training me more to be, I don't say being a boy, but training me to be more independent and be strong. And I think he has also seen that in his life, how women are treated, probably. And he trained me to be confident and speak up where needed and slow down where needed. So those were some of the things that I learned from him. And I would say they are in my DNA, and that's how I grew up. So not just being in academics, but being a sports star or representing my state for any of the games and structures. And he actually encouraged me to pick my own career, which is very rare coming from an Indian background.
Yes.
He didn't force me to go to STEM. He said, these are the options. This is where you stand. Right now, you're in a position to join any of the Ivy League schools. He did show an interest that I join STEM, but I wasn't very keen. I was more keen in finance. I was more keen in how do you calculate something when you make something. So it's not just on the making part of it. But I don't know how from that education to my computer science education I jumped, and from there how I jumped to my MBA, to my data science. But in the end, I always worked in technology. I really don't know how that happened. And even today, when I'm in doubt, I call him up and say, Dad, this is what I'm going through. And he, for lack of better word, he'll say, suck it up. You were taught how to deal with it. So why are you putting yourself down? So his encouragement has been a very big step in my life for everything that I've done. And I think I would definitely say it's also your society, and they say like charity starts from home. I think the true education and confidence also starts from home. I know I spoke too long, but this is what I'm really passionate about, and I owe it to him for how he has brought me up to be an independent woman.
And that's critical, right? I had the opposite experience. My dad actually said to me, why do you have to go to college? You're just going to get pregnant and have babies.
Yeah.
Right? That's the other side of the immigrant experience. It's
exactly. And for me, it was, and when I would talk to him and say, Dad, so what about marriage? And his question was, why do you need that? So it's like, if your brother is not thinking about it, why are you thinking about it? I don't think there's a difference in how you both should be thinking and pursuing your career. So that actually was a big step. And his statement that there's one wealth in this world, the more you spread, the more you earn, and that's education and knowledge. So he really pushed us to pursue our findings of what we want to do in life.
Fantastic. And so Radhika was a lot fortunate in that she had a parent who really said, yes, look, there's no arguing with this. You're yes. going down this road, and thank goodness her inner core did not rebel. Although I'll have to argue with you about, you're still doing numbers, right? You're just, instead of numbers on finances, now you're doing numbers, you're doing data related to AR, VR, and IoT.
Yes, right? Yes. I'm still doing numbers, but I'm doing for the emerging tech. So I am, in a way, in the tech field, which gives me a visibility into where the trends are going, how I can support, or what are the opportunities that should be looked into and what should not be. So
excellent.
It's
you're
still
connecting the dots. You started from there, and you can kind of see where you took off this way. So excellent. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, the rest of the youngsters here, the youth here, Alexis, Tati, Akil, and Casey, have there been adults in your life that have been inspirational, even if they weren't adults, if there was there somebody in your life that really advocated for you at a time when you really needed it? And also, was there a time when you needed an advocate and you were failed?
Yeah, so I was involved in this program like through Girls Inc. It was called Eureka, and it's like a 5-year program, and it's like STEM or STEAM more necessarily. And basically the first 2 years are like a just regular summer camp, and we did get to learn about science and stuff. But the last 3 years were an internship, and my first year I worked for VF Outdoor, which is like the umbrella company for North Face and JanSport and everything. And the thing that they made sure to do was make sure that our mentor was female. And, obviously, like my boss, Jana, she literally was the global color designer for all of North Face. And I was just like, whoa, like that's actually like insane. And we're like really, really good friends. And I just look up so much to her because that's such a high role to get into. And it was just really, really inspirational to have her as a mentor and role model.
Did she actually advocate for you in some manner, or you can picture her doing that in the future because you're still connected?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Fantastic. Well, that's the best kind, right? So that shows you the importance of it. What about you, Akil?
For me, I think an adult that has definitely like put me in a direction in life was actually my senior year teacher. I think you might know her, Miss Verbowie.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so Miss Verbowie, when I was a senior, I always knew I was into STEM, but I never had like a real world experience or like a direction. And when Verbowie mentioned PilotCity, right, like this project, I thought it was like another project we're just doing in class. But it turns out it was like a lot more than that. And I feel like she kind of like encouraged us and pushed us to work on this. And the fact that I got into, like, she also told us to like sign up for the internships and the interviews. And like because of her, I got into PilotCity, and PilotCity has given me like a lot of experiences and a lot of like, I'd say, real world knowledge that I could use. And I think definitely like Verbowie has set me in like a very positive direction in life, I think. she said.
And so how would it have been different if you'd never met this teacher, do you think?
If I hadn't taken her class, well, for one, I wouldn't have been a part of Pilot City. And I think I would have missed out on I would have had to learn these like lessons I'm learning in Pilot City like later on when I'm a lot older, or maybe a couple years from now. And yeah.
All right, thank you. Again, mentorship, really important, right?
Mhm.
Patty?
I would probably say my mom. In my house, my mom was the one who usually would go and fix things, and my stepdad would be the one to be home and cooking. So I grew up kind of the roles a little flipped, so I knew that I could do something more than just stay home. And it was very encouraging to do what I sort of wanted to do, which was kind of be an engineer and build stuff. So that's
Were
probably
parents really encouraging, Tati? Were either of your parents particularly encouraging you to go down this way? Or did you have somebody that said, yeah, maybe you should be doing something else?
my mom was very encouraging to just do something I really liked, which was I would always go around and build things with Legos and put other things and put them together. So she was very encouraging in putting me into a STEM program in middle school and leading me sort of on this path, which I really like, the engineering, and it's kind of how I got here, was just her encouraging me into doing what I really liked to do.
Yeah, so it's very validating. It sounds like that the path, the successful path to getting here is having somebody helping you and advocating for you and saying, this is just, you can do this. So that's what I'm hearing. Casey, did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, like Tati's mother, my mom makes more of the money in the family, and she has like the more prestigious job. She's a lawyer, and I say I've been more independent from my parents, but my mom has really been encouraging my sister to try out these STEM programs and to excel in academics. And I've just observed that my sister's very reluctant to approach STEM in any way.
Have you talked to your sister about it? And do you feel like
I've never really had a deep conversation with her, but I would say she does need more encouragement to try better in school.
so what could cause, and I want to be respectful because this is a great conversation. I want to make sure that our viewers can also put in some questions. We'll address those as well. What would make you feel safe to be an advocate for somebody else? Have you ever had that experience? And what would that circumstances look like? Because I think what we're at a moment in time, right, where men are beginning to understand how women have not had an equal opportunity to succeed. So we really need our men to be able to advocate for us in times when we need that. So when we need it, when you see one of your sisters struggling, do you feel like you could step up? And I'm addressing this to the two men. Do you feel like you could step up, and do you have an example of something where you either handled it, you thought pretty well, or maybe you wish you would have handled it better? Casey and Akil.
Yeah, there are many times when I probably should have said something to my sister about trying harder. She lacks work ethic for the most part, which I don't understand, because my mom has been like pretty good about teaching her the skills to pursue a higher education.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's been kind of rejecting the lessons my mom is trying to teach.
Well, there's personal stuff going on there, right? And that gets in the
Yeah.
way too. I had a younger sister who refused to go to college because my mother kept pressuring her to do so. So, you know, she's struggled with wages all of her life because she failed to go to college. So yeah, it's complicated sometimes, but and again, just encouraging you to be aware, and where you see maybe your sister is struggling a little bit, to kind of just be curious. Tell her, you know, this is the moment to practice the vulnerability that we talked about earlier. Be aware, just go to her and say, you know, what's going on? And I know relationships between siblings are complicated, but just be aware. And what about you, Akil? Have you had any experiences like that?
Like being an advocate.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had experiences with like friends and like trying to encourage them to join this program or joining that. And sometimes like, and there have also been times where like I also could have said something but I didn't. And it sometimes has to do with the fact that like I'm either afraid, like kind of afraid that I might say something that like offends them, or like kind of gets them. Sometimes like if I don't want to like push them too hard, it because I don't want them to like snap back at me, or like, you know, kind of get mad at me. So like it's sometimes like a very careful line that you have to go on. Sometimes like you want to encourage, but sometimes I also get nervous and like kind of like hold back sometimes.
Right. So application also can be, hey, you see your friend in trouble. There's a group of young people standing around, and suddenly somebody's starting to bully one of the young people in your group, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
advocation can also mean, hey, that's really not cool.
Okay.
It makes me feel really bad when I see you picking on our friend over here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it anymore. Right. So that's also advocacy. That's sticking up for someone when you see that they're vulnerable and that they could use an advocate, a friend.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you. And you guys have been very vulnerable today, and I really appreciate it. I think I'd like to open it up now to our chat. Are there any questions for the group? I see a lot of comments. And I think I'd like to read Alexandra's quote, because looks like she really put some effort into it. This was my first year in a computer class because I wanted to gain experience into coding, since I want to major in computer science, and I was one of 4 girls in the class. I think the first day I was shocked because I was aware of some issues regarding gender in STEM, but I had never experienced it firsthand. I think I was intimidated the first week, but I stuck with it, and it actually was an amazing experience. My teacher advocates for the club Girls Who Code, which I am part of, and I think this helped give me support. So it really is important, that support, that we feel that from the earliest ages, right? So we're not intimidated in terms of going forward. And I think that Radhika is right, that if you're going to hit those glass ceilings, they're going to be there. I know in my own personal experience, throughout my career, I have been told that I was impatient, that even though they had promised me promotions based on certain things getting done, at one point, unfortunately in the mid-'80s, I had a Crocker Bank manager tell me, "Oh, no, Debbie, you're not going to get that raise. I told you should be nice to me." So you know what that means, right? And so those are the kinds of experiences that we women will have, not all of us, but going through the system. And it's important for you to be aware that can happen, not go into shock like I did when it happened to me, but be prepared for the appropriate response and know that this really isn't about you, it's about them. So let's see now. Let me just follow up with another question there. So it seems like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about really is good leadership and talent development, right? That works for both men and women. And at the same time, as we've seen, research suggests that given the current environment, women can face different challenges in the workplace, challenges that make it more difficult to access stretch opportunities, networks, and resources. In your view, what are some of the systemic challenges? And what role can advocates, from parents and educators to managers and CEOs, play in addressing these challenges? And I think, Radhika, I'd like to start with you on that one. It's a pretty loaded, kind of big question there, but what are some of the systemic challenges that you might have seen in your career?
As I said originally, the two school of thoughts, and I've wedded myself in both schools of thoughts. But one of the things is and I tell this to most of people and to myself too, but sometimes I myself fail seeing that when you see a job opportunity, when you do an interview, it's very tempting to see the company name or the pay or type of responsibility you're going to get. But I would say that when you're actually doing an interview, take a step back and reflect on how the questions and facial expressions were of the interviewer, because that says a lot about how it's going to be for you in the future. And I think that's something even I fail to do quite a few times when I say, oh, this is an interesting role and I want it. The want versus how you end up are two different things. So definitely pay attention to what it is, because a company that, like at least at our company, we have a lot of female employees, and in pretty good positions too. My entire team is women. So it's, and of course we do have a few men too, but most of them are women. And that tells that their openness towards how they view a female, how they view a female vision is very different. And it's just a mix of how well the company blends in, because men can have a very different view and women have a very different view. And how open is the company in actually blending that together is very important. So I would say that step back and take a look at it, or reflect back after the interview to see how the questions were addressed, or were you given a chance to talk? Was your answer received well? Was there a smile during the entire conversation? And those are some of the things that will tell you going forward how you should present yourself, or whether that opportunity is the right one for you, or it may look very tempting, but it may not be the right future path for you. So just step back and take a look at it and see how you are viewed as a person, because an interview is more about you and very little about your skills, to be honest with you. It's how you talk and how you present and how you are interacted by the other person.
Absolutely. Things are changing, and I think young people need to understand that companies are very different. There are companies that are really embracing the fact that whether they do it for the social reasons or the business reasons, they realize that by hiring diversity into their management team and throughout the organization, it spurs innovation, it increases revenue, it increases public-private partnerships, potential of public-private partnerships. It encourages a different way of looking at things. So it's important to start looking at things like parental leave. As you're getting older, you're going to get, many of you will get married, you will have children, regardless of what your gender is. We have very mixed families nowadays. What are their policies towards leave of absence around childbirth and then child care itself? Do you see men and women sharing just those responsibilities in the organization, or do you see an encouragement for parental leave within the organization? Is there transparency around wages? There's more and more, there are companies that are being very transparent about, if you hire in at this wage with these skills, you're going to get paid this, and everyone knows that. And if you acquire this skill, then you can ramp up your salary even more. So look for ways that companies will work to fit you into their organization and to their culture. And does it fit? Because cultures are so different. You're going to find the PilotCity experience is kind of the model of where you want to be in terms of an organization that encourages your growth. They aren't all like that. So I couldn't agree with Radhika more. You interview them as well as they're interviewing you. Because if you get into a situation where you're unhappy, then suddenly you can't face the idea of losing the money and you start going down that rabbit hole. You've all seen your parents go through that. right? Many of you have. So a different future for your life. I am not seeing any other questions here, so I just want to close this out with any last comments from our panelists, please. All right, folks, I know you got something you're thinking about.
All I'll say is trust in yourself, because you know yourself better than anybody else. So don't let yourself down in any situation.
Completely
Your
agree.
instinct is the right guide for you.
Yep, when that little short hairs on the back of your neck go up and you're going, what? Trust it. Trust that. Especially women, trust it. We're taught not to trust it. Trust it. Thank you, Radhika. Casey?
Yeah, I mean, hearing Radhika's comments, that was what I came here to learn. I came here to hear about the job application process as a woman and how she was raised. And I thought that was very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Great. Wonderful. And Akil?
Yeah, it was definitely it was an eye-opening type of thing to hear you guys' experiences, and I think I've learned a little more on your guys' perspective today, definitely.
Great. Thank you for joining us today, Akil and Casey. Tati?
I just think it's pretty cool that more nowadays we have more younger males understanding what it's like and trying to advocate as well, that we all need to be equal and treat us as the same.
It's a beautiful moment. Believe me, it's taken a while to get here. So it is a beautiful moment. And Alexis?
I would just say, like, look up feminism and what it is, which is equality. Not that we're better, but it's equality. Just educate yourself on that and just be an advocate for women, and like speak up about it, and don't just like, be idle and just be like, oh yeah, it's whatever, because otherwise things aren't going to change.
Exactly. And then we do have one last question from Alexandra to everyone. How can we deal and educate a guy who thinks he has an advantage over you in the STEM field because he happens to be male? I'm thinking Radhika would answer that by saying, just be better. Just be better.
First of all, I'll put myself in that situation. If I come across that person, I think that's a very beautiful challenge to pick up, to show that person how you can actually be a better individual. I think it's not just about the equality. As I said, everything starts from home. The education starts from home. I would actually feel sympathetic towards that person because that's how he's been raised. So making him more aware of what we are, or making him hang out with a little bit more awareness of what women think and present. I would put him in a group of women for any project so that his eye opens up and he understands where women stand, because he's been he had such a closed focus his entire life. I think it's time to educate him. Who knows, he could be the next ambassador or advocate for women as he goes along. So giving that awareness and giving him that learning curve probably is the right solution from my point of view. And I've had a couple of people like that in my MBA projects. Trust me, they became my best friends later.
Right, because we showed them the wisdom of what they don't know. So, and then they become more empowered, right? By realizing, oh my God, there's this whole world of resources and people I had no idea that I could have access to. And it's wonderful. So on that note, that was a perfect way to end. Thank you, Radhika. Thank you so much, Alexis, Tati, Akil, and Casey, for this great discussion. I'm so glad we recorded it. And hopefully all of you have had a chance to really benefit from this. So I look forward to continuing to explore this in the next 10 weeks. Thank you, everyone.